Welcome everybody at this HelloID webinar. In this webinar we're going to discuss and show the new features of the April release of HelloID. If you cannot hear me right, please comment it in the YouTube section, of course, in the chat. And if you have any questions during this presentation, please ask them and I will try to answer them as best as possible. And I will have moments inside this presentation where I will look at if there are any questions. Normally we would have a vote where you can vote on the features that you would like to see in this presentation, so we can discuss them more. But I think in this release the features were really nice, lined up for a kind of a story. So I want to do that this time, so a little bit differently. So I want to begin directly with the new features. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat and I will answer them. So let's start. So I have a couple of new features, especially for provisioning and for service automation. And I'm going to start a little bit with the first one from service automation. But before that, I'm going to do a little flow. So you can see how these features of both of the domains work inside this product, but also if you use it in practice. So normally, as somebody is going to work and will be onboarded, so before that we need to put them inside of an HR system or something like that. So for this we created a little form which is called Create Employee HR, and so let's do that now. So let's create, let's say, James Brown. It doesn't have an end date, so let's say it's in consulting and it's working on the marketing department. Little bit strange titles, but that's no issue. So let's create them. So now the form is successfully submitted, but let's look at the things behind and something we have new in HelloID. And that's if we go to delegation and to activities, you can already see it. If we go to the activity that I just created, an HR person, and that's now besides the form submission logging, we normally had only task logging and the form data that I've put in. So here you can see the first name, James Brown, start date, and different types of function and department. But here you can see the task logging. So in this case, I said this number, which is the person, has an end date in my script. But this one is new, and that's the audit logging. And that means is we can write records to the system based in a standard structure where we can create audit records. I will show you a little bit later on what's the difference between process and audit logging, and also how we can use it in the future. But for now, what I can do is I can set a message or have a specific action, like create resource, create account, set group membership. All these different types of actions, you can find them on the docs page. There's a particular set that you can use. You can say for which system it is. So in my case, it's just for HR, but you can do this for Active Directory, of course, or things like that. You can say what's the unique display name for that particular user or person that you're doing this action from. And of course, you can assign a message and something like we call an identifier. So why are we doing this, and why not just stay with the task logging? Because I can also say with the task logging, okay, I created a user here. And that's the difference in purpose for this. We see two different kinds. That is, one is the audit logging, and the other, here we call it task logging, but in global we call it process logging. And there are two different situations where you're going to use this. So process logging you're going to use for helping, investigating, or maybe even debugging if the task works correctly, or in some situation has worked correctly a little bit in the past. And it could be that you're assigned, okay, you could say also the account is created or something like that, but you can also make it little steps before that. Maybe an account creation requires 3 different web requests to a different system, and you can have 3 different process loggings there, so you can define the outcome of each web request or something like that. So that helps you with debugging and investigating if this function is really, the little script, if it's really working correctly. And it helps you with that information to detect that. Also, in most cases, it's a little bit more information. Even something like in a loop, maybe a lot of memberships, you do that in a loop. So you will have a lot of records, and you can even have a count on them, how much group memberships you had and things like that. So it's more logging. It's also logging that doesn't mean anything after an X period. So that's really helpful with the process logging. And also we say it's more short-lived. The maximum amount we stored is, I think, is 3 months, but it depends really on the situation, but I think the maximum is 3 months. Some are even shorter. And that's different with the audit logging. The audit logging is used to keep it longer. So we have a maximum of 1 year, but you even supply you means to export the audit logging in different situations. So if you want to look at that, just look at the doc side how you can do that. But it's more long-lived. It's also structured. So there are different layers so we can report on it easier. Where the process logging is not structured, you can put everything in it, maybe even a number or something like that. It doesn't mean anything if you look at it later, but the audit logging is more structured. So we can build reports on it and help you determine what happened against an external system or maybe internal with HelloID for a longer period of time. And also we store who did it. If that's possible, of course, because sometimes it's an automatic process, but then we show that it's automatically. So that's the major difference between the process logging and the audit logging. All the audit logging will be put into our Elastic environment, a report engine, where we can build reports on it, and it will stay there for 1 year. And you can, as I mentioned it, you can export it there. So that's really important, and it's also really important to know that this is more structured. But how does it work if you look at a task? So if we go to the form, let's go to the HR employee form and let's go to the task. So we have the new task layout here that we released the previous release. In this case, I run it on-premise, but you can also run it in the cloud, of course. And I have a little script here that just creates a JSON file, so we can create a JSON file with all the employee data in it. And here's the trick. So I put in, or I create a JSON here, and here I said, okay, I build up an audit message. And the audit message has a structure, like I said, and it has an action, which is required. But there is, if not selected, there will be a default a system. So it's optional, but you can put it in. I would suggest it because it's better to use it if you were having reports later on, so you can see on what system it's going to be used. It's just text, so it doesn't have to be a system that exists in HelloID or something like that. Of course, the message. This is the only one that's really required. But you can still do a little string, but I would always suggest having something which is clear for you as well. If it's 1 year ago, you still want to be clear what the message is and what happened. Is error. This means that you could also register that something didn't went well to a system, and maybe if you did a retry, it went well after that. So you can also register that in the audit logging. The target display name, so that's a more friendly name for your target account or group membership or something like that. And in this case, I just use some values to determine the name of the person I've created, and also the unique identifier of the person. And a target identifier. And the target identifier is really important if you want to see if anything happens to the same account or something like that in the future. And with this you can set the same account name, or in this case I just put an HR and my unique identifier for the person. So I can easily search it in the future. So those are really important. But all besides the message are optional, but I really recommend to use them because it really can help you determine in the future what happened in the past. And of course, if an auditor comes, you can just say, okay, this happened for this user or something like that. Also, how we send this audit message is a little bit different than we normally use. So in this case, you need to send the right information, and you just have to add the tags and audit. You can just send the object as message data. So because of this tag, it knows, okay, I have to put it in the audit logging instead of the process logging, which is normally the case if you do right information. That's also a little bit different than we do in, for example, provisioning, but this is because we already use the right output for the data sources, and to have that package compatible, this option is better than doing the other option of when using a right output, you will have an object audit inside it. So that was a little bit tricky because we needed to be backwards compatible. So let me check if there are any questions so far. No. No questions yet. This is the new feature. So we added the audit logging. In the next release, we're going to put the audit logging in the Elastic so we can build reports on it. So that's a really important step. And with that, you can search for a person and see all things happening for, I think also for provisioning and the delegated forms. The product not yet, but for the delegated forms, it's a really important step. A little side note, we also, we're talking about audit logging, we also made a change for service automation. So when you change a data source, it's also registered in our report engine Elastic. So you can see if a data source is changed and by who. You cannot see the real changes, but you can see if it's created or updated or removed. And you can see who did the change. So that really helps if you want to see, okay, we see a difference in outcome currently, or we have an issue, and we can see, okay, this changed in HelloID, so maybe this is it. So that makes it easier to investigate an issue. And that data I can show you. It's added to the form changes report. So if I go to service automation, you have form changes. You should see it here in the data source changes. Oh, I currently don't have any changes. But normally you should see it here. Oh, maybe I should do it last. Yeah, that's the reason. My time frame was wrong, so it wasn't a change in that time frame. But you can see here the data source changed a little while ago. So that is really easy. Besides, of course, the changes we already had, like the form itself. So let's go back. So currently we added the person James Brown to the HR system, and now we can go to provisioning. So if you go to, already was it provisioning. So if I'm starting an import now, it should show that I added a new person. Let me refresh the screen. Maybe it's a little bit busy, so let's keep it importing. And in the meanwhile, what happens normally is James Brown is in the organization. So he works now at I don't know, ToolServer, let's say that. And after a while, he gets a different job at ToolServer, but it is just a different title, different kind of job. And in some situations, a new employee is created. There could be some text difference, or from volunteer to a normal employee, or something like that. So what could happen is that we create a new registration of the employee. So again, it's James Brown, the same start date, but with a different title and a different department. So let's say he's now developer at support. So let's create that. Okay, so let's start the import again. Okay, sometimes this happens because it's a live webinar, so maybe you see a little bit of let me check why it is failing. Import just failed. Let me check what is happening. Person import started, that's correctly. If this doesn't work, I'm going to change a little bit. I think I have some kind of connection issue with my agent. Import failed again. Yeah, so I have some issues, connection issues with my agent. So let's restart that one and try it again. If it doesn't work now, now it works. Yeah. Sorry guys, sometimes this happens. But now you see there are two persons added because James Brown is added twice. And I don't know if you notice it, but something happened at the aggregation in the menu. You will see a warning icon here. And as I mentioned it, James Brown was entered a while ago. Let's say the first one was 3 months ago, and now I entered James Brown again as an HR employee. And what we have now is kind of suggestions for your aggregation. So I created some kind of key which you can say, okay, James Brown, they have the same kind of key and they match with each other. So in the previous we had the manual merging of persons. that we explained a while back ago. But now we have suggestions based on that information. So here you can see that there's a suggestion because we have two James Browns, which are essentially the same person. So what it does is, if there is a single one and it's got an account and things like that, it says, hey, wait a second, I'm not going to do anything. I'm not starting an enforcement for the second James Brown because we think it's the same person as the first James Brown. So it stopped. And in this case, because both the James Brown didn't get any entitlements yet, it will stop both the James Browns from getting any entitlements, so it excludes them from enforcement. And what I can do here is I can either select one of them, and I can also, so in this case, this one is selected and this one a match of 100%. And I can see here the records of both of them, and based on this suggestion I can conclude, okay, this is a genuine one person, so I can approve this suggestion and merge them. Before that, I still need to select my leading person, so in this case maybe this is the leading person, and I can approve them. The other thing is, what I can do is, okay, no, this isn't the same person, so please reject it. So please say, okay, I don't want to merge those two, just reject the suggestions, and then it will just run the enforcements for two persons. Of course, if it's approved and there's you can create a new snapshots and run the enforcement, only the enforcement is run for a single person because they are merged. But for that single person, all the contracts of both persons will be under it. So all the permissions will be assigned based accordingly on both of the contracts. So in this case, both on the developer and I don't know what the other one was. Let me check. I can see it here, I think. This developer one. Oh, the consultant. It was the consultant in the marketing department. But how does this work? First off, it doesn't work out of the box. You have to configure something. And the first normal thing is you go to the configuration, of course. And you will see here that you can enable the aggregation suggestions. And you also have a matching score and another option where you can say, okay, this is the maximum amount that a person should be merged to a single one in just one instance for the suggestions. The default is 10. You cannot set it any higher because we think, okay, if you have 10 suggestions for a single person, so something is wrong. But I think that you should ask, okay, but I see a matching score, but where is it matching on? So that's something new, and let's go to that first before I'm going to show you how you can preview it and change your matching score and things like that. So what you need to do is, if you go to your system, and let's go to Flex System and my person mapping. I already currently have it, but you will see a new field that's called aggregation. And you need to add that. And what you can do with aggregation is create a string of multiple fields, or of course a single field if you really want to, where you can match the persons. So in this case, I used mostly values that you have when at your birth. So your first name, your last name, your birth last name, of course, your date of birth, your place of birth, and your gender in this case. And I use that to populate the field. So in this case, I don't have all the fields in my HR record, but in this case, this is an aggregation for this person. So that's the string. I can do this for multiple systems. And what should happen is both the systems and inside the system should match with each other. And we have a kind of algorithm based on that, which matches those strings together. And of course you can determine yourself in your configuration for your project what that string should be. But we are running an algorithm to match those strings together, and a percentage will come out. And that's something you can easily see if you go to configuration and you can see a preview. So when I have the mapping on each system, and I've created a snapshot that the values are in the persons, I can run, let's say for Albert Johnson in this case, a preview. And here I will see the scores to all other persons inside my system based on the highest score. So the 70% is the highest score that is matched is string, and so this is the string that we currently have for the aggregation property of this person, and the best match we found in the whole system is with this string, and it's 77%. Of course this is not green because this is below my matching score. So if I say okay, this is 60, and I do a oh sorry, now I need to do it higher, 70. I'll talk about it why it didn't work, but if I do 70, you will see that 4 people will match, and so I create one suggestion for these 4 people to be merged together. Also, we will create more suggestions, of course, but because these people will also match with the other people based on the score, but it could change, of course. So the other one, and that's the reason why 60% didn't match, and that's this rule. So the max matching person. So here you can see more than 10 people have a score higher than 60%. So we don't think then that you have a good matching score. So we don't give out any suggestions in this case. So it's really important to set this matching score, but on the other side you only get suggestions, so don't do it automatically yet. That will come in the future, but now it's just a suggestion, so you can always intervene if you want to approve or deny it. The only thing is the persons that coming in and has a suggestion will be excluded from enforcement, so you have to act on it, and that's really important. To help you with that, we create an incident when this happens. So if you want to be notified by email when this happens, you can just register your email address at the incident portal or in the incident configuration, and you will receive an email that this happens, and then you can go here and just say, okay, I want to approve or reject it. So it's a semi-automatic person aggregation, and it's the first step to becoming automatically, of course. Let's see if we have any questions so far. No, any questions? So let's go back. So it's a really difficult process to see. Also the matching score, you really have to tweak this a little bit. I think as default we set this to 90, so it's pretty high, but I think it's also a good percentage, because sometimes we see this almost the same string as the same. Also, if you have an important attribute that you really want to match, it's good to put it in the middle of the string. So the middle of the string, the weight of the match is a little bit higher than at the end, the first and the last part. So that's, I think, important to know if you really want to check this. But of course you can just change your string and just preview again until you have a good result with the matching score and the strings, of course. I have to say still, the suggestions are only for new persons, so we won't interfere with your currently imported persons. But to help you merge currently already imported persons, we also have an option here. And if you go to suggestions, we have a redetermine. And this option will help you redetermine all the new suggestions over all persons. But this process can take a while, depending on how many persons you have in the vault, because the calculation is of course persons times persons. So we do this in the background. So you can just push this button, and in my case it's pretty fast, I think, because my set isn't that large, and it only generates 52 suggestions. But of course, if your environment is bigger and you have more persons in the vault, it can take longer. So it could take maybe an hour, maybe 2 hours before you see the suggestions. But in that case, you can just click it and it will run in the background and come back anytime later, and you will see the suggestions here. And again, of course, here I can say, okay, click on it, and I can reject or approve it. If you reject it, and you do a redetermine, you will see the same suggestion again, because the levels are still above that you want. Hopefully this is clear. With this, we had to change a little bit of the UI as well. So when you're running a snapshot, you will see a flag, or if it's busy, because we don't want to create snapshots a lot of time. So if it's busy, you will see a running and the time that it started, and in this case it's really snappy, it's quick, so you can see that the snapshot is finished yet. Also, there was an option in the persons where you could exclude or include a person. We removed that option because we now have also a label here where you can see that this person has a suggestion. And besides this, we also have the merged, of course, label and excluded label. And to make the option include and exclude was a bit too busy in the UI and didn't fit. So now you can only do the exclusion in the business rules and then exclusions. So it was already present here, but now you can not do it from the person, but you can just search here on the person. The change is that we added some person details here. So now you can see the contract and information as well. So that makes it a little bit easier to select. But that is in a nutshell person aggregation. And I think with this, all the new big features that we have in this current release. So let me check the questions once again. So no new questions. So of course, everything is in the documentation on helloid.docs.com. If you have any questions, you can contact your office, maybe your support department. If you need some extra features for all these functionality, or think, oh, maybe we should add this or add that, or in whole, of course, the feedback of the system, you can put it on. If you go to roadmap.helloid.com, you have a feedback button on the right top corner. And of course, if you want to see the new features that will be available in the next couple of releases, or maybe the bigger themes or milestones that we call them in the future, you can see those on the roadmap.helloid.com. So for now, I would like to thank you for your attention, and hopefully everything is clear. It was an in-depth webinar. So if you have any questions, contact those other parties, and don't forget to subscribe, of course, and hit the bell icon so you will never miss a webinar. Or of course the release videos, or we're really busy also with some instructional videos on YouTube. So please subscribe, and thank you for your attention.